You know, usually when we sit down for a deep dive, I have a pretty good handle on the vibe. We've done tech histories, true crime, those weird philosophical rabbit holes. And usually I'm excited. I'm ready to learn. But today, I'm looking at the stack of documents you've brought into the studio, and I see charts. I see these declassified military logs, biological schematics, and I am genuinely having a hard time reconciling this with the subject matter.
It is a bit of a cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
A bit.
To see a top-secret stamp next to a silhouette of what looks like, well, a cartoon character.
Cognitive dissonance is putting it lightly. Because, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, the mission for today, this deep dive, is to analyze a children's cartoon. We're talking about SpongeBob SquarePants.
Not quite. That's the surface level. That's the wrapper.
Okay.
If you look at the source material I've highlighted here, specifically this document titled Subject 741B Radiological After Action Report, we aren't analyzing a cartoon. We are analyzing a surveillance log. We are looking at a documentary.
A documentary.
Okay.
You're saying the show is a documentary.
I'm saying it's a biological surveillance documentary.
Yeah.
One that's about the long-term effects of high-yield radiological exposure on marine life.
Okay. I want to be crystal clear for you, for me, for anyone listening, because I feel like I'm losing my mind just a little bit.
Yeah.
We are talking about the sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea.
Yes.
We were talking about his starfish friend, and you are telling me this isn't just some animator's fever dream from the late 90s.
I'm saying that if you strip away the bright colors and you mute the laugh tracks and you look at the geography, the physics, and the biology presented in the show, it maps perfectly, and I mean terrifically, frighteningly perfectly, to a very real, very dark chapter in human history.
So everything I thought I knew about Bikini Bottom is what? A lie.
It's a filter,
Yeah.
a colorful mask placed over a tragedy. And today, we're going to peel that mask off. We're going to look at the after-action report of what actually created that city. And I have to warn you and the listeners, this sort of ruined my childhood. It changes everything.
Well, misery loves company, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Where do we even start with something like this? The sponge.
No.
Whoa.
No. To understand the organism, you have to understand the environment. We have to start with the name. Bikini Bottom.
Right, which I always just assumed was a joke. You know, beaches, bikinis. It's a beach town. It's a pun.
And that's what they want you to think.
Yeah.
It's disarming. But Bikini Bottom is a literal geographical designation.
Literal how?
It refers to the seabed, the bottom of the ocean, directly beneath a place called Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands.
Okay, and for anyone who maybe skipped history class or slept through the Cold War chapter, why does that spot matter? Why is Bikini Atoll a name I should know?
Bikini Atoll is ground zero, specifically for Operation Crossroads. This is 1946. World War II is over. The United States military, specifically a joint Army-Navy task force headed by Vice Admiral William Blandy, decided they needed to know what would happen if you dropped an atomic bomb on a naval fleet. They wanted to test the survivability of warships in a nuclear age.
And so they needed a target.
They needed a sacrifice. They assembled a fleet of over 90 vessels target ships in the lagoon of Bikini Atoll.
90!
Oh, yeah. We're talking battleships, destroyers, cruisers, landing craft. The works.
That's an entire armada.
At the time, it was the fourth largest fleet in the world, and it was a ghost fleet. They packed them with fuel, with ammo, and with animals.
Wait, animals?
Pigs, goats, rats, thousands of them.
Oh, no.
They strapped them to the decks,
Good.
put them in the turrets. They wanted to see the biological effects of radiation up close. They anchored all these ships in this beautiful, pristine lagoon, and then they dropped the bombs.
Bombs, plural.
2 of them. But the second one, Shot Baker, that's the one that matters for us. That's the one that created Bikini Bottom.
Okay, so why that one specifically? Was it bigger, more powerful?
It wasn't about the size. It was a 23-kiloton implosion-type weapon. They nicknamed it Helen of Bikini. The difference was the location of the detonation.
What do you mean?
Shot Able, the first one, was an airburst. Dropped from a plane, exploded in the sky. Classic mushroom cloud. But Shot Baker, they detonated it underwater.
Under the water.
Specifically, 90 feet below the surface of the ocean.
Okay, pause right there. I'm trying to visualize this. We've all seen the newsreels, right? The mushroom clouds blooming in the sky over the desert. But what in the world happens when you set off a 23-kiloton nuclear weapon under the ocean?
It is. It's cataclysmic. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around the physics of it. So imagine the energy of the sun condensed into a small sphere, detonating 90 feet underwater.
Okay.
The first thing that happens isn't a mushroom cloud, it's a shockwave. A hydraulic shockwave that moves at supersonic speeds. It pulverized the seafloor.
It crushed the bottom.
Obliterated it. It excavated a crater. And this is key. The report notes the blast created a crater roughly 2,000 feet wide and about 30 feet deep.
Hang on a second. 2,000 feet wide, 30 feet deep. A shallow, depressed basin in the ocean floor.
Cool.
That sounds exactly like the establishing shots of the town in the show. The city is always in this dip, surrounded by these high cliffs or walls.
Exactly. That isn't a valley you're looking at. That is the crater. That is the hole in the earth left by the Baker bomb.
So the entire civilization is built inside the blast crater.
It's built in the scar tissue of the explosion.
Yeah.
But it gets so much worse.
Of course it does.
The explosion didn't just dig a hole. It displaced 2 million tons of water in a fraction of a second.
2 million tons.
It shot a column of water, a hollow chimney of spray.
Yeah.
6,000 feet into the air.
6,000 feet? That's what? That's more than a mile high, isn't it?
Over a mile high, yeah.
Yeah.
And when all of that water came crashing back down, it created something the military called a base surge.
Define base surge for me. It sounds like some generic military term, but I'm guessing in this context it's horrifying.
Imagine a tsunami. But instead of clean ocean water, it is a 900-foot-tall wall of radioactive sludge.
Oh, God.
It's water mixed with seabed sand, pulverized coral reef, and this is the really gross part, vaporized metal.
Vaporized metal from the ships.
Specifically from the landing craft, the LSM-60, that the bomb was suspended from. That ship didn't sink. It ceased to exist. It was turned into gas and liquid metal almost instantly.
And that just mixed in with the water.
That metal mixed with the water and the sand and the radiation, and this 900-foot base surge rolled over the entire lagoon. It coated everything. Every ship, every rock, every surface.
So it literally painted the bottom of the ocean.
It laid down a foundation of radioactive silt. The report actually calls this the soil of Bikini Bottom. So when you see the characters walking around kicking up dust...
They're kicking up fallout.
They're kicking up fallout. They're walking on the pulverized remains of the U.S. Navy and the irradiated coral reef.
That's heavy. And it completely changes the vibe of the visuals. I mean, when I think of that show, the first thing I think of is the colors. The bright blue sky, and specifically those flower clouds.
Ah, yes. The flowers.
You know the ones I'm talking about. They look like hibiscus flowers. They're pink, purple, blue. They just float there. They're charming. It gives the whole place this tropical, like, vacation vibe.
And that is what the report calls the visual lie. Section 2. This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, disgusting.
Lay it on me.
Those aren't flowers.
Please don't tell me they're just like radioactive clouds of fallout.
They aren't clouds in the traditional sense, and they are certainly not flowers. The report identifies them as pollution.
Pollution.
Specifically, solidified oil slicks and chemical debris.
Floating on the surface of the water.
Exactly. You have to remember, we are looking up from the bottom of the ocean. During the Baker test, that supersonic hydraulic shockwave expanded across the water. It created a ring of dark water that the observers said looked like an oil slick, followed by a crack of whitened water.
And the lagoon was filled with 90 ships.
90 ships, many of which were full of fuel and oil, many of which sank or were damaged and leaked everything into the water.
So the flowers they're oil stains in the sky.
They're the persistent remnants of oil-based pollutants and chemical waste, yeah. The report explains that their wonky, distorted look, that sort of kaleidoscopic aesthetic, is because of light refraction.
What do you mean?
The water is so saturated with particulate matter and algae blooms, which were caused by the radiological heat, that the light bends as it passes through. It bends around these floating oil slicks.
That ruins the aesthetic, doesn't it? Look at the pretty sky. No, you're looking at the bottom of a toxic barrel.
It gets worse.
Why does it always get worse?
The report cites observations where these clouds actually fall to the seafloor. They land as solid objects.
Fall?
It happens because the oil clumps lose buoyancy. They accumulate heavy metal isotopes from the water column, get too heavy, and just plummet.
So it's heavy metal rain.
Effectively, yes. The characters are living under a ceiling of toxic waste that occasionally crashes down on their heads.
Wow.
There's also a secondary theory in the report. They call it the propeller theory.
Okay, what's that?
If you look at the shape of those flowers, usually 3 to 5 petals, they almost perfectly mirror the fin patterns of mid-century naval propellers.
From the 90 sunken warships.
The lagoon is a graveyard of 90 warships. The theory is that the flowers could also be reflections or even debris patterns from these sunken propellers, just distorted by the irradiated water column.
So whether it's oil or wreckage, it's all just debris.
And here is the clincher. The report mentions prehistoric time travel logs.
You mean the episodes where they go back in time?
Right, like in SB-129, where Squidward goes to the prehistoric past. Future.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Exactly. Look at the sky in those prehistoric sequences. The flower clouds are completely absent. They just do not exist in the prehistoric era. They only appear after the arrival of the U.S. military.
Which confirms they are man-made, they are a footprint of the bomb.
Correct. The entire geography, from the ground they walk on to the sky they look at, is defined entirely by ecological collapse.
Okay, so the stage is set. We're in a radioactive crater looking up at an oil-slick sky. Now I have to talk about the actors on this stage, the residents, because this is where the report seems to shift from, like, historical analysis into biological horror.
This is the genetic aberrations section. And I want to be clear about this. The report is insistent that these are not cartoon characters. They are successful mutations. The mechanisms are all there. Gigantism, cognitive shifting, hyperregeneration.
Okay, let's start with the big one then. Subject S1. The sponge.
Right. Subject S1. The report classifies him not as a kitchen sponge, which is the common misconception, right? The thing you wash dishes with.
Yeah.
But as a mutated Tethiowilhelma.
Tethiowilhelma. Is that a real thing?
It's a very real species of sea sponge. And here's the science. This is the critical part. This specific species possesses the highest level of radiation resistance ever observed in a multicellular organism.
How high?
They can withstand X-ray doses up to 518 gray.
Okay, you gotta give me some context here. What does 518 gray mean to me?
It's about 100 times the lethal dose for a human being. A human being melts at that level. Your DNA completely shreds. Your cells forget how to be cells. This sponge, it thrives.
So when we see him get shredded into a million pieces or flattened like a pancake or blown up, and then he just pops right back into shape.
That is not cartoon physics. The report identifies that as sustained somatic cell turnover.
Constant regeneration.
His body is constantly in a state of aggressive, accelerated repair. Transcriptomic analysis shows an overexpression of DNA repair genes. He's basically a cancer that can't die.
That's a really dark way to look at it. He's not flexible. He's just regenerating from catastrophic damage at all times.
He's a biological slurry held together by will and radiation. And the shape. The square pants. The square body.
Yeah, why the square? Nature doesn't really do perfect squares.
Nature doesn't. But intense radiation stress does some very weird things to cell structure. The report calls it epithelial to mesenchymal transition.
Okay.
Basically, under high-frequency radiation stress, the cells reorganize themselves into a geometric structure, in this case, a square, to maximize structural integrity.
So he didn't choose to be square.
The radiation forced his cells into a box to keep him from completely falling apart.
That is deeply disturbing, but maybe not as disturbing as what happened to his best friend. Let's talk about subject P2, the starfish.
Patrick, yeah. This part of the report is tragic. This is where it really highlights the victim aspect of this whole thing. Subject P2 is described as a victim of the radiation-induced bystander effect, or RIB.
RIBE. What's that?
It's a phenomenon where irradiated cells can actually cause death or mutation in neighboring non-irradiated cells.
Yeah.
But for P2 himself, the pathology is severe cognitive decline and gigantism.
So his stupidity, his dumbness.
It's not stupidity, it's brain damage. The report calls it radiation-induced encephalopathy.
Oh, wow.
His nervous system has been fundamentally destroyed by constant oxidative stress.
So he's not just dumb, he's hurt.
Think about his behavior. He can't process the most basic social cues. He has these bouts of sudden, inexplicable rage or incredible strength. He forgets basic tasks instantly.
Right.
The report says this is due to the structural disarrangement of his glial cells. He is walking around with a melted brain.
And that bystander effect you mentioned.
He is a walking exclusion zone. The report notes that unirradiated cells die when they get near him. He is so radioactive that he is biologically hazardous to his own environment.
That completely recontextualizes their friendship, doesn't it? S1, the sponge, is the only one resilient enough to hang out with him without, dissolving.
Exactly. They are friends because they are the only two who can survive the proximity to one another. It's not a buddy comedy. It's a quarantine zone.
Man. Okay. Let's move on to subject S3, the squid. Or I guess he's an octopus, right?
Arcus vulgaris, technically, though the mutation gives him characteristics of a squid. The report diagnoses him with chronic neuroinflammation and white matter necrosis.
Which explains the mood.
It explains the clinical depression, yeah. Subject S3 is miserable, he's irritable, he has a completely flattened affect. But the late brain injury diagnosis is fascinating. The report specifically mentions demyelination.
Demyelination, that's,
It's the stripping away of the protective coating on your nerve fibers. Now, for a cephalopod, an octopus, their intelligence is distributed. It's in their lanes. Their tentacles are basically part of their brain.
okay.
So if you have demyelination in your limbs...
You lose coordination. You can't control them properly.
Exactly. Now think about his art. Think about his clarinet playing. He is desperate to create beauty, but he physically cannot coordinate his movements to produce the sound or the image that he wants to.
So it's not a lack of talent?
It's a neurological disability caused by the fallout. His brain knows what to do, but his body can't do it.
In his house, the big Easter Island head.
The report identifies that structure as a crude lead-lined bunker.
Whoa! Get out of here.
No, think about it. It's solid stone, minimal windows. He spends all his time hiding in there. The report says it's a subconscious, or perhaps even a conscious attempt, to shield himself from the gamma radiation that's constantly bombarding him from the outside.
He's living in a fallout shelter.
He's hiding in a bunker, right next door to two walking, talking radioactive reactors. Of course he's miserable.
And the environment itself is hostile. The report talks about the fauna, the jellyfish.
He's subject J4, yeah.
In the show, they always buzz, like bees.
Right. And you just assume it's a visual pun, right?
Yeah.
Sea bees.
Yeah, exactly.
The report says no. That buzzing sound is the sound of radioactive discharge.
What?
These jellyfish have evolved into bioelectric predators. They are swimming in water with such high concentrations of dissolved radionuclides they've incorporated it. They aren't venomous. They are electric. They shock you with radiation.
And the report says they have a hive mind.
Yes. Evidence of radiation-enhanced intelligence. We've seen them operate machinery. They recognize and respond to musical frequencies. They swarm with strategic purpose. The Bikini Atoll experiment has completely rewritten the food chain.
So we have a town of mutants. But it's not just their bodies that are wrong, it's their minds. Section 4 of this report, the psychology of the damned. And this part makes me look at the comedy of the show in a totally different, much darker light.
The overarching diagnosis is collective radiation-induced psychosis. The report argues that the entire town is suffering from a combination of manic depressive illness and organic brain injury.
What are the symptoms they point to?
Just look at the population. Mania. Constant, frenetic hyperexcitability.
Right.
Disinhibition. They have no social boundaries whatsoever. They engage in incredibly dangerous behavior with a smile on their faces. Cognitive decompensation. Memory loss.
And the laugh. We have to talk about SpongeBob's laugh, that high-pitched machine gun laugh.
It's iconic, isn't it?
Body.
But medically, the report analyzes it as a symptom of psychotic mania. It's a reflex. It's an involuntary action, a result of hippocampal neurovascular disarrangement.
So, he isn't laughing because he's happy.
He's laughing because his brain is misfiring. It's a tic, a neurological symptom of his poisoning.
It's a scream disguised as a chuckle.
That's a good way to put it.
And then you have the specific pathologies of the others, like Mr. Krabs.
Subject C5, a crab. He's obsessed with money. But you have to think about the context. He lives in a post-apocalyptic crater at the bottom of the sea. Money is a useless abstract concept.
Right, you can't spend it on anything real. There's nothing to buy.
Exactly. So why hoard it? The report suggests frontal lobe syndrome, an OCD, but it says the cause is specific. Heavy metal accumulation.
Oh.
He has a hard shell. The report suggests his shell acts as a kind of lead sponge, absorbing heavy metal isotopes from the environment over decades. He is suffering from severe, chronic, heavy metal poisoning.
Which would cause aggression, paranoia, and obsession.
Precisely. And his counterpart, plankton, same thing, different flavor. Paranoid delusions, bipolar disorder, and his obsession with the secret formula.
Yeah, what is that about?
The report theorizes it's a form of racial memory.
Racial memory.
Plankton is obsessed with obtaining a blueprint, a technical schematic, a secret formula. The report suggests this is a residual subconscious memory of the naval blueprints for the atomic bomb itself.
Wait, you're saying he's trying to rebuild the weapon that destroyed his world?
Subconsciously, yes. He doesn't want a burger recipe. He wants the power that leveled his entire civilization.
That is unbelievably dark. Speaking of the burger, the Krabby Patty. The report has a theory on this too, doesn't it?
It does. It notes that Stephen Hillenburg, the creator, or the archivist, as this report might view him, confirmed there are no animal products in the patty. It's vegan.
So what is it?
A synthetic, algae-based nutrient paste. But the report speculates its purpose isn't just nutrition, it's control.
And control how?
It likely contains chemical stabilizers, or even sedatives,
To keep them calm.
to keep the entire mutated population compliant, to manage the manic outbursts and the psychotic breaks. It's the soma of the deep. They eat the patties, they feel good for a little while, they forget the constant horror of their existence.
Okay, so if this is an experiment, an ongoing surveillance operation, who's running it? Because an experiment needs an observer. And that brings us to the most suspicious character on the whole roster, subject Sandy Cheeks.
The agent.
She never fit in, did she? I mean, a squirrel from Texas, living at the bottom of the ocean is the one thing that never made any sense.
And the report exposes her completely. She is not a resident. She is a sentinel, a strategic insertion by a governing body.
And her employer, Tredome Enterprises Limited.
Which the report identifies as a classic front organization, likely a shell for NASA or the CIA or some other three-letter agency.
Let's look at her gear, because that's the dead giveaway.
The suit. We all just assume it's an air suit so she can breathe. But look at the design. It's bulky, it's industrial, it has reinforced joints. The report classifies it as a radiation-hardened hazmat containment system.
She's not keeping air in, she's keeping radiation out.
Exactly. And the dome she lives in?
The tree.
It's a sterile, pressurized laboratory. It's the only place in the entire lagoon that is clean. She lives in a bubble to prevent herself from succumbing to the local toxicity.
She's the only one who is clean.
And notice her relationship to the others. She doesn't just hang out with them. She studies them. She tests them. She runs experiments on them.
And her bosses, we've seen them in the episode Chimps Ahoy, the chimpanzees.
Lord Reginald, Professor Percy, Dr. Marmalade. These aren't just funny monkeys in suits. The report is clear. They are the overseers.
And their mission.
The report states they are harvesting biomechanical innovations from the mutants.
The inventions.
Exactly. Sandy is always building rockets and teleporters. But look at what the mutants build. The banana peeler, the automatic back scratcher, the ukulele tuner. These seem silly and useless to us, but to the overseers, they are proof of directed evolution.
And the report says the chimps have been searching for solutions for 117 years.
Yeah, that's a weird detail, isn't it?
That predates the bomb by decades.
Which suggests the experiment might have started even before 1946, or that the chimps are part of a very, very long-term biological warfare program. They're using the radiation to see if they can jumpstart evolution and create new, useful technologies.
So Sandy isn't their friend. She's their zookeeper.
She's the handler.
Yeah.
The field agent. And her karate.
Yeah, she's obsessed with karate, always chopping and fighting.
The report calls that combat evaluation protocol.
What does that mean?
She fights the strongest mutant SpongeBob who can regenerate from anything. The Alaskan bullworm, a creature of immense size and power. She isn't playing. She is recording data on radiation-enhanced strength and durability. She's stress testing the biological assets.
She's testing the weapons.
Correct. She's measuring their lethality for her bosses.
Okay, this is all terrifyingly plausible. It all fits together in this really sickening way. But usually with these things, there's a smoking gun, a piece of evidence that you just can't explain away. And the report points to one specific episode, Dying for Pie.
This is the clincher. This is the moment they showed their hand. If you want to see the trauma, you have to look at the footage.
Set the scene for us, for anyone who hasn't seen it.
In the episode, SpongeBob gives Squidward a pie, but it's actually a bomb. It falls, it's about to explode, and the episode shows the explosion. But it doesn't animate the explosion in the usual cartoony style.
No, it cuts away. It cuts to live action footage.
It cuts to actual archival footage of the Operation Crossroads Baker explosion.
The real bomb, the actual historical footage of the nuclear tests that started all this.
The report argues this isn't a stylistic choice, it's not a joke. It is a trauma-induced racial memory. They are showing us, literally, the moment of their creation, the visual record of their own apocalypse.
And the perspective matters, right? The way it's shown.
Yes. The explosion is shown from above the sea, from the air. This mimics the exact view of the naval observers who watched the test. The mutants are recalling the event that defined their existence. It's a collective flashback to the moment the world ended and their new, twisted lives began.
And the energy involved. I mean, the report breaks down the math here.
It does. EARE equals MC22, 23 kilotons. That's about $9.60 times 1013 joules of energy. All of that condensed into that one small lagoon.
And the decay, the fallout. It doesn't just go away.
No. Cesium-137 and strontium-90, they have half-lives of around 30 years. The report confirms The isotopes are still there, the mutation is ongoing, the soil is still hot.
So what does this all mean when we put it all together? The geography in the crater, the pollution in the sky, the biological mutations, the collective psychosis, the government agent, the archival footage of the bomb. What are we actually watching when we turn on this show?
We're watching a surveillance log. The report's final conclusion is that the show is a series of declassified files edited and animated for human consumption.
For what purpose?
To normalize the concept of a radioactive future.
To make us comfortable with the end of the world. To make us laugh at it.
Exactly. The report calls it the Bikini Atoll biological succession. These creatures are the organic version of the ghost fleet of 1946. They are the life that grew directly out of the bomb.
It really changes the tone of the ending, doesn't it? Almost every episode ends with a laugh, a moment of absurdity.
It does. And the report leaves us with a final, very provocative thought. These creatures are in a state of permanent, manic horror. They are biologically unstable, they are mentally shattered, and they are living in a toxic sewer of their own creation. And what do?
We laugh at them.
We are laughing at the victims of a nuclear holocaust.
That is chilling. Absolutely chilling.
And that laugh, SpongeBob's laugh.
I don't think I can ever hear it the same way again.
It's the sound of the irradiated void, echoing forever.
Well, that is going to stick with me. I don't think I'll be able to watch a Saturday morning cartoon ever again without checking the background radiation levels. The next time you see that little yellow sponge, just remember, he's not ready. He's radioactive.
And he's watching you back.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time. And try to sleep well.